Jake Mitchell felt every step crunch beneath his boots as he walked across the moon's dusty surface. The gray powder kicked up with each movement, floating slowly back down in the low gravity. Ahead of him stood Tranquility Station, its collection of connected domes looking like giant bubbles against the black sky. Earth hung above the horizon, a beautiful blue and white marble that seemed almost close enough to touch. But Jake wasn't here for sightseeing. He was here because something had gone terribly wrong at this colony 6 months ago. The official story said there were technical problems. The government evacuated all 200 people who lived and worked here, sealed the place up, and told everyone to forget about it. But Jake had connections. He knew people who knew people. And he'd managed to get his hands on the last transmission sent from Tranquility Station before communications went dark. That transmission mentioned something the miners had found deep below the surface. Something that shouldn't be there. Something impossible. Jake reached the main airlock and pulled out a small device from his suit pocket. The override codes he'd bought weren't cheap, but they worked. The heavy door hissed and groaned as it opened for the first time in half a year. Dust that had settled on the seals puffed out into the vacuum. Stepping inside, Jake waited for the outer door to close behind him. The chamber began to pressurize, filling with breathable air. When the inner door opened, he stepped into a scene that gave him chills. The colony looked like everyone had just vanished in the middle of their day. In the cafeteria, he saw trays of food still sitting on tables, now rotted and disgusting. Coffee cups were tipped over, their contents dried into dark stains. Personal tablets and data pads were scattered everywhere, screens cracked or flickering with error messages that nobody was around to fix. What bothered Jake most was the silence. Every space station, every colony, every ship he'd ever been on had constant background noise. The hum of air recyclers. The buzz of computers. The clank and whir of automated systems doing their jobs. Here, there was nothing. Just the sound of his own breathing echoing inside his helmet. He decided to keep it on, despite the breathable air. Something about this place made him want that extra layer of protection. He made his way through empty corridors, his boots echoing on metal floors. Room after room told the same story of sudden departure. A child's toy left in a hallway. Someone's jacket hanging on a hook. Pictures still on walls showing smiling families. These people had lives here. Then one day they were gone. Jake found the administrator's office on the 3rd level. The door was unlocked, which saved him from using another override code. Inside, the desk was covered with papers and data tablets. He started going through them, looking for anything useful. The log entries from the final week were what he needed. The colony administrator, a man named Robert Hayes, had kept detailed notes. The entries started normal enough, talking about mining quotas and supply shipments. Then things got strange. 5 days before the evacuation, miners working in the deepest tunnel reported their equipment detecting a large empty space beyond the rock wall. This was unusual because their geological surveys hadn't shown any cavities in that area. They decided to drill through and investigate. 4 days before evacuation, they broke through. The notes from Robert Hayes became less professional and more amazed. The miners had found a massive cavern that the scans somehow missed. But that wasn't the shocking part. The cavern was artificial. Someone or something had carved it out of solid lunar rock. And the walls had markings on them. Patterns. Symbols. Art, maybe, or writing in a language nobody recognized. 3 days before evacuation, the survey team went deeper into the cavern. That's when they found it. Hayes didn't describe what it was clearly. He just kept writing that it was beautiful. That it was impossible. That it changed everything humanity thought it knew about its place in the universe. 2 days before evacuation, military personnel arrived at the colony unannounced. They sealed off the mining tunnels and ordered everyone to pack only essential items. The evacuation happened within hours. The final log entry was just one word, written over and over: beautiful. 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 Jake saved copies of everything to his own tablet, then checked the mining tunnel coordinates Hayes had recorded. Level 9, Shaft 7B, approximately 3 kilometers down. He memorized the route and headed for the elevators. The mining levels were even more unsettling than the living quarters. The work lights were all out, leaving everything in total darkness except for the beam from Jake's helmet lamp. He passed drilling equipment parked where workers had left it. Toolboxes sitting open. Hard hats hanging on hooks. The elevator took him down, and down, and down. When he finally reached level 9, the temperature display on his suit showed it was actually colder here than on the surface. He found Shaft 7B and began walking into the tunnel network. At first, the tunnels looked normal. Human-made. The walls showed the rough marks from drilling equipment, and support beams were spaced evenly along the ceiling. But as Jake went deeper, following the coordinates, things changed. The drill marks faded away. The walls became smooth, almost polished. In the beam of his light, he could see patterns carved into the stone. Geometric shapes that seemed to flow and connect in ways that hurt his eyes if he looked too long. The patterns seemed to shift and move when he wasn't looking directly at them, though he knew that was impossible. The tunnel opened into a space so large his light couldn't find the far walls or ceiling. Jake's suit sensors couldn't even get a good reading on the cavern's size. The air in here registered as different too, containing trace elements that shouldn't exist in a sealed lunar cavity. Then he saw it, and his breath caught in his throat. Floating in the center of the massive cavern, held up by nothing visible, was a ship. But calling it a ship seemed inadequate. It was a work of art. The hull flowed like liquid frozen in time, with curves that seemed organic, almost alive. Yet mixed into those curves were angles and edges so mathematically perfect they had to be designed. The surface wasn't metal, or stone, or plastic, or anything Jake could identify. It seemed to shimmer between different states of matter as his light moved across it. The ship had to be 500 meters long, shaped like a teardrop that someone had caught mid-fall. There were no visible engines, no windows, no doors that Jake could see. Just that impossible, beautiful surface. As he stepped closer, afraid to even breathe too hard, panels along the hull began to glow. Soft blue light spread across the surface in patterns that matched the carvings on the cavern walls. The ship was responding to him. It knew he was there. Jake pulled out his scanner, hands shaking. The readings made no sense. The device kept showing error messages, then numbers that couldn't be right. 50,000 years old, it said. 50,000 years this thing had been sitting here, buried under lunar rock, waiting. Humans had only left Earth's atmosphere a couple hundred years ago. Humanity had only built its first cities maybe 10,000 years back. This ship had been here 5 times longer than recorded human history. A section of the hull shifted, flowing like water, and a ramp extended down to the cavern floor. An invitation. Or maybe a test. Jake stood at the bottom of that ramp and understood everything. He understood why the government evacuated everyone so fast. This wasn't just an archaeological find. This was proof that humanity had never been alone in the universe. That someone else had been here, on our moon, before we even knew the moon existed. And someone in power wanted to keep that secret buried. Jake took a deep breath and started up the ramp. His footsteps made no sound on the strange surface. The material felt solid under his boots, but also somehow soft, like it was adjusting itself to provide perfect traction. The entrance waited ahead, glowing with that soft blue light. Whatever answers waited inside that ancient ship, Jake was about to find them. For better or worse, humanity's understanding of everything was about to change forever. He stepped through the entrance and into the unknown. The moment Jake stepped inside the ship, his sense of reality started breaking down. The corridor in front of him stretched forward, but it seemed impossibly long. He'd seen the ship from outside. 500 meters, maybe. But this hallway looked like it went on for a kilometer or more. He walked forward slowly, watching the walls on either side. They were glowing. Not with lights, exactly, but with patterns that seemed to live inside the material itself. Soft blues and greens flowed through the walls like veins carrying luminescent blood. And the strangest part was how they responded to him. When he moved his hand near the wall, the patterns shifted, clustering around his fingers like they were curious about him. Jake didn't need a map. Somehow, he just knew where to go. His feet carried him through turns and intersections without hesitation, like he'd walked these halls 1,000 times before. The ship was guiding him, leading him somewhere specific. He could feel its presence now, almost like it was alive. Not artificial intelligence like the computers back on Earth. This was something else. Something older and stranger. The corridor opened into a massive chamber that took his breath away. The room was shaped like half a sphere, and the entire curved ceiling was transparent. Through it, Jake could see the cavern outside, the rough lunar rock surrounding this impossible vessel. But he could also see more than that. Streams of data seemed to float in the transparent material, symbols and patterns that shifted and changed. In the center of the room stood a pedestal, roughly waist height. On top of it sat something that looked like a crystal, but it shifted colors constantly, moving through shades Jake didn't even have names for. The crystal pulsed with a gentle rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Jake approached it slowly. His training told him to be careful, to run tests, to proceed with caution. But something deeper than training urged him forward. This was why he'd come here. This was what had called to him across empty space. He reached out and placed his hand on the crystal. The universe exploded inside his mind. Information poured into Jake's consciousness, but it wasn't like reading or hearing or seeing. It was pure understanding, flooding directly into his brain. He gasped and would have pulled away, but his hand seemed fused to the crystal. Or maybe he didn't want to let go. The knowledge was overwhelming, but also beautiful. He saw Earth, but not as it was now. He saw it as it had been hundreds of thousands of years ago. Primitive humans huddled in caves, afraid of the dark, barely surviving. And he saw them. The beings who had built this ship. They didn't look human, but they weren't monsters either. They were elegant, tall, with forms that seemed to shift slightly as they moved, like they existed in more dimensions than humans could perceive. These ancient beings had come to Earth not once, but dozens of times over hundreds of thousands of years. Jake watched them visit early human tribes, not as conquerors or gods, but as careful gardeners tending a promising plant. They gave gifts, but subtle ones. The knowledge of fire came from them. The first tools weren't human innovations, but alien lessons taught slowly, carefully, so humans would think they'd invented these things themselves. Even language had been their gift. The first words spoken by human mouths had been based on patterns these beings taught, sounds that helped organize thought and communication. They'd been guiding humanity's development since the beginning, nurturing the species, preparing them for something. This ship wasn't alone. The knowledge flowing into Jake showed him that thousands of these vessels were hidden throughout space, tucked away on moons, asteroids, and planets where humans would eventually spread. They were way stations, left behind deliberately. Each one waited patiently for humanity to grow up enough, to become wise enough and advanced enough to find them and understand what they represented. But then Jake saw something darker. He saw why the ancient beings were gone. They called themselves the architects, and they had seeded many worlds with life and guidance. But they'd encountered something else out in the deep darkness between galaxies. Something that didn't build or create or nurture. Something that only consumed and destroyed. The architects called it the silence, because wherever it went, all light and life and thought simply stopped. Entire civilizations vanished. Whole star systems went dark. The silence wasn't alive in any way that made sense, but it wasn't dead either. It was a force of pure entropy, unmaking everything it touched. The architects had fought it. Jake saw glimpses of battles that spanned light years, weapons that reshaped reality itself, desperate last stands on the edges of known space. And they'd lost. Not quickly, but inevitably. One by one, the architects' worlds fell silent. Their great works crumbled. Their songs ended. But before the last of them disappeared, they'd left these ships behind. Insurance policies. Seeds of hope. The vessels were gifts for younger species like humanity. They were weapons to fight the silence if it ever returned. They were warnings about what lurked in the darkness beyond explored space. And they were tests, to see if species like humans were worthy of the architect's legacy. The flow of information slowed, and Jake became aware of his body again. His hand was still on the crystal, but he could move now if he wanted. He didn't pull away yet, though. The ship was still showing him things. Systems throughout the vessel were waking up. Jake could feel them coming online, responding to his touch, bonding with his neural patterns. The ship was scanning him, learning him, making him part of itself. Or making itself part of him. The distinction seemed blurry. He was the captain now. The ship had chosen him, or maybe he'd chosen it. Either way, they were connected in a way that went deeper than any human technology Jake had ever used. He could feel the ship's systems like extensions of his own body. The engines were his muscles. The sensors were his eyes. The shields were his skin. And through those senses, Jake suddenly felt something alarming. Ships were approaching the moon. Human ships, military vessels, moving fast. His newfound awareness let him see them clearly even though they were still thousands of kilometers away. 3 destroyers, 6 frigates, and 3 support craft. All of them were armed. All of them were headed straight for Tranquility Station. The ship fed him their communications, intercepting and decoding transmissions instantly. The orders were clear. Secure the site. Eliminate any unauthorized personnel. If the anomaly cannot be contained, destroy it with nuclear weapons. Time until arrival was less than an hour. Jake's heart raced. They were coming to bury this. To destroy it. To make sure humanity never learned that they weren't alone, that they'd never been alone. Someone at the highest levels of government had decided this truth was too dangerous to reveal. The ship hummed around him, waiting. It had weapons, Jake knew. Systems that the architects had designed to fight the silence could certainly handle human military vessels. But using them would mean killing people. Fellow humans. Pilots and soldiers just following orders. Through the transparent ceiling, Jake watched Earth hanging in space. Billions of people down there, living their lives, not knowing what was happening up here on their moon. Not knowing that their entire understanding of history and humanity's place in the universe was wrong. Not knowing that ancient beings had guided them since the dawn of their species. Not knowing that something terrible might be coming from the darkness between stars. They deserved to know. Humanity deserved the truth. Jake took his hand off the crystal, but the connection remained. He was part of the ship now, and it was part of him. Systems continued powering up, preparing for what came next. The vessel gently lifted off the cavern floor, no longer needing to rest. Jake stood in the center of the bridge, feeling the immense power at his command, and made his decision. He wouldn't let them bury this. He wouldn't let fear and secrecy rob humanity of its inheritance. If the military wanted to stop him, they'd have to try. But he really hoped it wouldn't come to that. The ship rose through solid rock like it was passing through fog, phasing through matter in ways that shouldn't be possible. They emerged from the moon's surface just as the fleet entered weapons range. Time to show humanity what they'd been missing. Jake's mind suddenly lit up with warning signals that felt like alarm bells ringing inside his skull. The connection with the ship let him see what was happening thousands of kilometers away as clearly as if he were watching it on a screen. The military fleet had arrived in lunar orbit, and they weren't here to talk. Through the ship sensors, Jake could see every vessel in perfect detail. 12 ships total, arranged in an attack formation. 2 massive destroyers anchored the group, their hulls bristling with weapon systems. The rest were a mix of frigates and support craft, all moving with military precision toward Tranquility Station. Toward him. The ship fed information directly into his thoughts. Weapons status on all vessels, active. Missile tubes, armed and ready. Target locks, acquiring. Jake saw the data for every weapon system in the fleet. Nuclear-tipped missiles, railguns, plasma cannons, everything Earth's military could throw at a target. And all of it was about to point at him. A countdown appeared in his mind. 90 seconds until missile launch. 89. 88. Jake's hands started shaking. These weren't enemy aliens or hostile invaders. These were human beings following orders. Soldiers doing their jobs, probably told they were protecting Earth from some kind of threat. Inside those ships were people with families, friends, lives they wanted to get back to. And his government had ordered them to destroy the most important discovery in human history. The choice hit him like a physical weight. He could run. The ship was fast enough to escape, to vanish into deep space where they'd never find him. He could hide this incredible gift from the architects, keep it safe but secret. That's probably what the military expected him to do if he'd found it first. Or he could let them destroy it. Let them fire their missiles and turn this ancient vessel into vapor and dust. Let humanity continue in ignorance, never knowing what they'd lost. Never knowing they weren't alone. Never knowing about the gifts they'd been given or the danger that might be coming. 60 seconds until launch. No. Jake straightened up, his decision crystallizing into certainty. Humanity deserved better than fear and secrets. People had a right to know their own history, their true history. The architects had left these ships as gifts, as inheritance for when humans were ready. Well, Jake decided they were ready now, whether the politicians liked it or not. The ship responded to his determination, systems surging to full power. Jake felt it lift off the cavern floor, felt the ancient engines coming alive after 50,000 years of sleep. They rose toward the solid rock ceiling, and Jake had a moment of panic before the ship did something impossible. The rock just stopped being solid. The ship passed through hundreds of meters of lunar bedrock like it was nothing but mist. Matter phasing, the ship's knowledge whispered into Jake's mind. The architects had figured out how to temporarily shift objects out of phase with normal matter. They could pass through walls, through planets, through anything solid as easily as walking through air. They emerged onto the moon's surface just as the first missiles launched from the fleet. Jake saw them coming, brilliant streaks of light against the blackness of space. 20 missiles in the first wave, each one carrying a nuclear warhead powerful enough to vaporize a city. Their contrails painted lines across his vision, beautiful and terrible at the same time. The missiles moved fast, accelerating hard, closing the distance in seconds. The ship asked him a question without words. It wanted permission. It could destroy those missiles easily, could probably destroy the entire fleet without breaking a sweat. The architects had built these vessels to fight something that consumed civilizations. Human weapons were nothing compared to that. But Jake refused. No killing. Disable them, stop them, but don't kill anyone. These were his people, even if they were shooting at him. The ship understood and agreed. It moved, and Jake felt the motion through his entire body. Not like being in a vehicle that accelerated and turned. More like his thoughts were moving and his body was just coming along for the ride. The ancient vessel dodged the first wave of missiles so fast they seemed to be standing still. Jake watched in amazement as the ship wove between the incoming warheads. It moved through three-dimensional space like a dancer, spinning and weaving in patterns that should have been impossible. Several times, missiles passed within meters of the hull, but the ship seemed to know exactly where each one would be before it got there. More missiles launched. The destroyers were firing everything they had now, filling the space around the moon with enough firepower to crack a small asteroid. Nuclear fire blossomed in the darkness as warheads detonated, trying to catch the ship in their expanding spheres of destruction. The ship's shields activated automatically, invisible barriers that deflected the blast waves and radiation like water flowing around a stone. Jake felt the impacts, felt the enormous energy being absorbed and redirected, but the ship handled it effortlessly. The shields had been designed to withstand weapons that could tear apart planets. Human nukes barely registered as a threat. Through his connection with the ship, Jake could feel the vessel's full capabilities. It wasn't just dodging or defending. It was holding back, massively, because he'd asked it to. The ship could have ended this fight in seconds. It could have shut down every vessel in the fleet simultaneously, or destroyed them so completely there wouldn't even be debris left behind. Instead, it danced. It moved through the storm of missiles and energy beams like it was playing a game, never hitting back, just avoiding and defending. Showing the fleet that it couldn't be touched, couldn't be hurt, couldn't be stopped by anything they threw at it. Jake saw the military commanders trying different tactics. They spread their ships out, trying to catch him in crossfire. They synchronized their attacks, firing from multiple angles simultaneously. They even tried ramming maneuvers, desperately trying to force a collision. Nothing worked. The ship existed in multiple positions at once, or seemed to. Jake's human mind couldn't fully grasp how it moved, but he felt it happening. The vessel was partially phasing out of normal space, existing in several places simultaneously, making it impossible to predict or target. The ship's countermeasures activated next, and Jake watched in fascination as it turned the fleet's own weapons against them. Missiles suddenly reversed course, their guidance systems rewritten by the ship's technology in microseconds. They streaked back toward the vessels that fired them, and Jake held his breath, terrified there would be collisions. But the ship was more precise than that. The missiles detonated at carefully calculated distances, electromagnetic pulses washing over the military vessels without destroying them. One by one, the ships went dark. Power systems overloaded. Computer cores scrambled. Weapons offline. Engines dead. In less than 5 minutes, the entire battle group floated helpless in space. Not destroyed. Not damaged beyond repair. Just completely disabled, their crews safe inside but unable to do anything except watch as the alien vessel hung in space before them, utterly untouchable. Jake took control of the communication systems. The ship helped him, boosting his signal across every frequency, making sure every vessel in the fleet could hear him. Every military base on Earth and the Moon. Every satellite. Every station. He was about to broadcast to the entire solar system, and there was no way anyone could stop him or shut him down. His voice was steady when he spoke, despite everything that had just happened. My name is Jake Mitchell. I'm a human being from Earth, just like all of you listening right now. I'm not your enemy. I'm not a threat. I'm someone who found something amazing, something that changes everything we thought we knew about ourselves. He paused, gathering his thoughts, feeling the weight of the moment. This ship I'm in right now is 50,000 years old. It was left here, on our moon, by a race that visited Earth throughout our entire history. They guided us. They helped us. They gave us gifts like fire and tools and language itself. They watched us grow from primitive survivors into the spacefaring civilization we are today. Jake's voice grew stronger, more passionate. And our government wants to destroy it. They want to bury this truth, to keep humanity in the dark about where we really came from and what our place in the universe actually is. They're willing to use nuclear weapons on our own moon to make sure nobody ever learns what I've learned. Through the ship's sensors, he could feel attention focusing on him from all over human space. His broadcast was being picked up everywhere. People were listening, recording, sharing. This ship is our inheritance, Jake continued. It was left for us, for when we were ready to know the truth. Well, I think we're ready now. I won't let fear and secrecy rob humanity of this gift. This vessel belongs to all of us, not to politicians or military commanders who think we can't handle the truth. He looked at Earth hanging in space, beautiful and fragile. We're not alone in the universe. We never were. And it's time everyone knew that. The military fleet floated silent and powerless around him, and Jake knew that everything had changed. There was no putting this secret back in the box. Humanity had just learned its true history, whether anyone was ready for it or not. Within hours, Jake's broadcast had spread across every corner of human civilization. Someone on one of the disabled military ships had recorded the whole thing, the footage showing an impossible alien vessel dancing through nuclear fire while a regular guy from Earth explained that humanity's entire history had been guided by ancient beings. The video went viral faster than anything in recorded history. People watched a lone human in an alien ship defeat an entire military fleet without firing a single shot, without killing anyone, just proving that everything they thought they knew about being alone in the universe was wrong. Social media exploded. News networks ran the footage on repeat. Governments tried to deny it, to claim it was fake or some kind of elaborate hoax, but too many people had seen it happen in real time. The truth was out, and there was no way to stuff it back in. Jake knew he had to go back. He couldn't stay in space, hiding with this incredible discovery. The ship agreed with him, its ancient intelligence understanding that this was a moment that required courage, not caution. Together, they made the decision to return to Earth. But where could they land? Every government on the planet wanted to either lock him up or take the ship for themselves. Jake needed neutral ground, somewhere no single nation could claim authority. The ship suggested Antarctica, the one continent that belonged to all of humanity through international treaty. It made perfect sense. The journey back took only minutes. The ship moved faster than anything humans had ever built, crossing the distance from Moon to Earth in the time it took Jake to catch his breath and prepare himself for what came next. They descended through the atmosphere, and Jake half expected missiles to streak up toward them again, but none came. Maybe the military had learned their lesson. Maybe the politicians realized they'd already lost this fight. The ship settled onto the ice in the middle of the frozen continent, its landing so gentle that it barely disturbed the snow beneath it. Jake stood on the bridge, looking out at the white landscape, and took a deep breath. This was it. No turning back now. He opened the ship's doors and walked down the ramp, his feet crunching on Antarctic ice. The cold hit him immediately, but he barely felt it. Within hours, aircraft started arriving from every nation on Earth. Scientists, journalists, diplomats, military officers, all coming to see if this was real. Jake made his announcement simple. The ship would open itself for study. Any scientist who wanted to learn from it was welcome. Any engineer who wanted to understand its systems could come aboard. He wasn't going to let this technology become a weapon or a tool for one government to dominate others. This was humanity's inheritance, and it belonged to everyone. The first scientist who entered the ship came out in tears. Jake watched a famous physicist from Japan sit down in the snow and just cry, overwhelmed by what she'd seen. A Russian engineer fell to his knees, his hands shaking as he tried to explain what the propulsion system could mean for human space travel. An American materials scientist kept saying the same thing over and over, "It's impossible, but it's real. It's impossible, but it's real." The technologies inside the ship made humanity's best achievements look like children's toys. The fusion reactors that powered Earth cities were crude and inefficient compared to the ship's power source, which pulled energy directly from the fabric of space itself. The rockets that had carried humans to Mars and beyond were laughably primitive next to propulsion systems that could bend space, making travel between stars not just possible but practical. But Jake understood something that most of the excited scientists and engineers were missing. The ship wasn't just a pile of cool technology to study and copy. It was a responsibility. A burden. A warning. He spent days in the ship's databanks, diving deeper into the information the architects had left behind. And he found things that made his blood run cold. The ship's records showed the locations of other vessels, thousands of them, hidden throughout human space. On Mars, buried under the polar ice. On Europa, in caverns beneath the frozen ocean. In asteroid belts, disguised as ordinary rocks. On exoplanets humans had just begun to reach. Each ship was waiting for someone to find it, someone worthy of becoming its captain. The architects had scattered these vessels like seeds, hoping they would grow into something beautiful. Hoping that humanity and other young species would find them when the time was right. But the databanks also showed something else. Evidence that the silence was still out there. The force that had destroyed the architects hadn't disappeared. It was still moving through the galaxy, still consuming civilizations, still spreading its entropy across the stars. And humanity's expansion into space, humanity's rapid growth and exploration, had caught its attention. The Silence knew humanity existed now. It knew humans were spreading, building, growing. And eventually, it would come for them, just like it had come for the architects. Jake realized the full truth then. The ships weren't just gifts. They were weapons. They were humanity's only chance to survive what was coming. The architects had left these vessels behind as their last act, hoping that younger species would use them to succeed where the architects had failed. He called a meeting with the assembled scientists, diplomats, and military leaders who had gathered in Antarctica. He stood before them and explained everything. The ships waiting to be found. The threat lurking in deep space. The responsibility that came with this inheritance. "We need captains," Jake said, his voice carrying across the crowded room. "We need people willing to find these other ships, to bond with them, to learn to use them. Not for conquest or power, but for protection. Because something is coming, and we need to be ready." The room fell silent. Then someone stood up. Major Rachel Stone, a decorated military pilot who'd flown combat missions in the outer colonies conflict. She was known for her skill, her courage, and her absolute refusal to back down from any challenge. "I'll go," Rachel said simply. "Show me where one of these ships is, and I'll find it." Then another person stood. Dr. Kevin Hayes, an astrophysicist who'd spent his career studying deep space phenomena. "I'll go too. If there's something out there that destroyed an advanced civilization, we need to understand it. We need to be ready." A third person rose. Officer Diana West, a security specialist from the Mars colonies. "Count me in. My family lives on Mars. If something's coming for humanity, I want to be on the front lines protecting them." One by one, people stood up. Scientists and soldiers. Engineers and explorers. People from every nation on Earth and from colonies throughout the solar system. Young and old, experienced and fresh, all united by the same realization: humanity had just learned it wasn't alone in the universe, and that knowledge came with a price. Jake felt something shift in that moment. The ship felt it too. He could sense its approval through their connection. These weren't people looking for glory or power. These were people willing to take on an incredible burden because someone needed to. Because humanity needed protectors, guardians, champions willing to stand against the darkness. Over the following weeks, Jake worked with the volunteers, using the ship's databanks to identify the locations of other hidden vessels. Rachel Stone headed to Mars, following coordinates that led to a ship buried beneath Olympus Mons. Kevin Hayes traveled to Europa, where another vessel waited in the ice. Diana West went to an asteroid in the belt, where sensors detected unusual energy signatures that matched the architect technology. Each time someone found a ship and bonded with it, Jake felt a connection form. The vessels were linked somehow, able to communicate across vast distances instantly. He could sense the other captains, feel their presence, share information and understanding through the ships themselves. More people volunteered every day. A former military commander named Frank Butler found a ship on Titan. An engineer called Amy Rodriguez discovered one hidden in the Kuiper Belt. A pilot named Chris Anderson bonded with a vessel that had been disguised as a small moon orbiting a distant exoplanet. The fleet was growing. Humanity's guardians were assembling. And Jake stood at the center of it all, the first captain, the one who'd taken the initial leap of faith. He'd gone to that abandoned moon colony looking for answers and found something far bigger: humanity's true place in the cosmos, and the incredible responsibility that came with it. The ships hummed with power and purpose, their ancient systems fully awakened after 50,000 years of patient waiting. Their captains trained and learned and prepared for what might come. And somewhere in the deep darkness between stars, the Silence continued its slow advance, unaware that humanity had just found the tools to fight back. The age of ignorance was over. The age of guardians had begun. And Jake Mitchell, the lone man who'd entered an abandoned moon colony, had started it all. 6 months had passed since Jake Mitchell first stepped aboard that ancient ship beneath the moon's surface. 6 months that had transformed everything about humanity's understanding of itself and its place in the universe. Now, 12 ships hung in orbit above Earth, their elegant forms catching sunlight as they circled the planet in perfect formation. Each ship had found its captain. Each captain had proven themselves worthy of the incredible responsibility they'd accepted. And today, they would all stand together before the leaders of humanity to explain what came next. Jake walked into the United Earth Assembly chamber with his fellow captains beside him. Rachel Stone moved with military precision, her years as a combat pilot evident in every step. Kevin Hayes adjusted his glasses nervously, still looking more like a scientist than a warrior despite everything he'd experienced. Diana West scanned the room with the practiced eye of a security officer, noting exits and potential threats out of habit. There were others too. Frank Butler, the grizzled commander who'd found his ship on Titan and still couldn't quite believe he was bonded to alien technology. Amy Rodriguez, whose engineering background had helped her understand the ship's systems faster than anyone expected. Chris Anderson, the youngest of them all at 26, who'd discovered his vessel on a distant moon and shown a natural talent for piloting that amazed even the ships themselves. 12 captains for 12 ships. 12 ordinary humans who'd become something more. The assembly chamber was packed. Representatives from every nation on Earth sat in their designated seats, but the balconies were filled with observers, journalists, and citizens who'd won lottery spots to witness this historic meeting. Billions more watched on screens around the world and throughout the solar system. Everyone wanted to hear what the Guardians had to say. Jake stepped up to the podium, feeling the weight of all those eyes on him. He'd never been comfortable with public speaking, but the ship's connection gave him confidence. He could feel its presence in his mind, steady and supportive, lending him strength. 6 months ago, I was nobody special, Jake began, his voice amplified across the chamber and broadcast to the world. Just a guy who got curious about an abandoned moon colony and found something impossible. But what I found changed everything we thought we knew about ourselves. He gestured to the viewing screens behind him, which lit up with images of Earth throughout history. Primitive humans discovering fire. Ancient civilizations building their first tools. The development of language and writing and mathematics. The architects prepared us for this moment, Jake said. They visited our world not once, but dozens of times across hundreds of thousands of years. They watched us grow from scared animals hiding in caves to the spacefaring civilization we are today. They gave us gifts along the way. Fire to keep us warm and cook our food. Tools to shape our environment. Language to share ideas and build communities. Curiosity to push beyond what we knew and explore what we didn't. Jake paused, letting that sink in. They didn't do this to control us or make us dependent on them. They did it to make us ready. Ready for what's coming. The screens changed, showing data from deep space probes that had been launched months ago, sent to investigate strange anomalies detected at the edge of explored space. What they showed made the entire assembly chamber fall silent. Regions of space where stars simply vanished. Not exploded or collapsed, but disappeared as if they'd never existed. Areas where space itself seemed darker, like something was draining the light from reality. The readings didn't make sense according to any human understanding of physics, but the ship's databases recognized it immediately. The silence. Just as the architects had warned. It's real, Jake said quietly. The thing that destroyed the architects, the force that consumed their entire civilization, is still out there. And it's moving. Our expansion into space, our rapid growth as a species, has caught its attention. The probes detected it 3 weeks ago, and we've been monitoring it since. It's approximately 40 light-years away and moving slowly, but it is coming toward us. Panic rippled through the chamber. Representatives started talking over each other, demanding to know why they hadn't been told sooner, asking what could be done, some calling for immediate evacuation of outer colonies. Jake held up his hand, and something in his bearing made them all fall quiet. He wasn't the same uncertain man who'd entered that moon colony 6 months ago. The bond with his ship had changed him, given him a strength and presence that commanded respect. We're not telling you this to cause panic, Jake said firmly. We're telling you because you deserve to know the truth. All of humanity deserves to know what we're facing. But here's the important part, we're not helpless. The architects left us these ships specifically to fight what they couldn't. They gave us the tools we need to succeed where they failed. The screens changed again, showing the 12 ships in orbit, their forms beautiful and deadly at once. These vessels were designed to combat the silence. Their weapons, their shields, their ability to phase through matter and exist in multiple places at once, all of it was created for this exact purpose. The architects lost their war, but they made sure we'd have a chance to win ours. Rachel Stone stepped forward, adding her voice to Jake's. We've been training for 3 months now, learning what these ships can do, understanding their systems, preparing for what's coming. The ships teach us, guide us, help us become the captains they need. We're ready to defend humanity. Kevin Hayes spoke next, his scientist's mind evident in his words. We're also studying the silence, trying to understand what it is and how it works. The ship's databases have given us more information about physics and reality than humanity has learned in our entire history. We're making progress, finding weaknesses, developing strategies. One by one, each captain spoke, explaining their role, their preparation, their determination to stand between humanity and the darkness. The assembly listened, and slowly the panic faded, replaced by something else. Not quite hope, but determination. The stubborn human refusal to give up even when facing impossible odds. When all the captains had spoken, Jake returned to the podium for his final words. The architects left us a message in my ship's core database. It's been guiding me since the beginning, and I want to share it with all of you now. The screens behind him filled with alien symbols that shifted and flowed, then translated into simple words that everyone could understand. We were never meant to be alone in the dark, Jake read, his voice strong and clear. We were meant to light it. He looked out at the assembly, at the cameras broadcasting to billions of people, and felt the presence of his fellow captains beside him, felt the ships waiting in orbit above, felt the weight and wonder of everything that had happened. Humanity has always been stubborn, Jake said with a slight smile. We've clawed our way up from nothing to everything. We've survived ice ages and plagues and wars and disasters that should have wiped us out. We've gone from caves to space stations, from stone tools to starships, from wondering if we were alone to learning we never were. His voice grew stronger, more passionate. The architects believed in us. They spent hundreds of thousands of years preparing us for this moment. They left us their greatest weapons, their most advanced technology, their final hope. And now it's our turn to prove we were worth that investment. Jake stood tall, surrounded by his fellow guardians, backed by the might of 12 ancient vessels and the determination of an entire species that had never known how to quit. The silence is coming, he declared. But so are we. We're humanity, and we don't hide from the dark anymore. We light it up. We push it back. We fight for every person, every world, every star in our corner of the galaxy. The age of hiding is over. The age of guardians has begun. The chamber erupted in applause, representatives rising to their feet, the sound echoing through the hall and out across the world. Above, the 12 ships began to glow brighter, responding to the determination of their captains and the species they'd chosen to protect. In the depths of space, 40 light-years away, the silence continued its slow advance, unaware that humanity had just decided it would go no further. The architects had fallen, but their inheritors were ready to stand where they had fallen. Jake looked at his fellow captains, at Rachel and Kevin and Diana and Frank and Amy and Chris and all the others who'd answered the call. They nodded back, understanding flowing between them through their ship's connection. Humanity had been given the tools to fight. Now it was time to prove they could use them. The war hadn't started yet, but when it did, the silence would learn what the architects had known all along. Humanity was ready to rise to the challenge. And this time, the darkness would not win.